he was forced to become his husband to his own mother. The most disturbing case ever revealed in the United States. That phrase echoed through the Louisville, Kentucky courthouse halls in March of 1963, when one of the most shocking documented cases of consanguinity in American history emerged from the depths of the Appalachian Mountains, where geographical isolation had created closed-off communities for generations. For over 4 decades, the Harrington family had lived in absolute secrecy. What occurred on that 200-acre rural property would forever alter our understanding of the limits of human degradation. Thomas Harrington, just 16 years old in 1943, was compelled by his own father, Jeremiah Harrington, to assume marital duties with his mother, Martha, following the patriarch's premature death in a mining accident. What started as a distorted tradition of maintaining a pure bloodline twisted into the most unimaginable nightmare a family could endure. The Harrington property sat 15 kilometers from the nearest town, Pineville, hidden among century-old oaks, shrouded hills, and a persistent mist that seemed to guard its darkest secrets. There, far from society's eyes, 3 generations lived under rules established by the family founder, Ezekiel Harrington, who arrived in the region in 1897 obsessed with preserving what he called blood purity. Martha Harrington, 34 in 1943, had lost her husband in a local coal mine collapse. With 5 children to raise and no financial means, she was trapped by the family traditions imposed by her deceased father-in-law. Thomas, the eldest son, was selected to assume the role of family protector, a cruel euphemism for what would truly unfold over the next 2 decades. Young Thomas, described by neighbors as a shy, blue-eyed boy with brown hair, had no choice. The social pressures of the era, combined with geographical isolation and financial dependence, created an environment where resistance was impossible. He was forced to accept a union that violated every known social and moral norm. In the early years, the family managed to keep up appearances. Thomas worked the small family farm, growing corn and tending a few head of cattle, while Martha cared for the younger children. To the few neighbors who occasionally visited, they were simply a mother and son struggling to survive after tragedy. But the truth was far more disturbing. Martha gave birth to her first child with Thomas in 1945. A girl, born with severe facial deformities and learning difficulties. Sarah, as she was named, displayed physical characteristics that signaled the devastating effects of consanguinity: eyes set too close together, a cleft palate, and impaired mental development. A second child was born in 1947, a boy named David, who developed chronic respiratory issues and frequent seizures. The effects of inbreeding grew increasingly evident, yet the family remained isolated, with no access to proper medical care or outside guidance. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel to discover other equally disturbing cases hidden away for decades. These are stories society preferred to forget, but which must be told to understand the depths of human degradation. By 1950, 7 years into this forced union, the consequences of consanguinity within the Harrington family could no longer be ignored. Martha, now 41, had borne 4 children by Thomas, each with more severe deformities and health problems than the last. The third child, born in 1949, was Michael, a boy who could never walk properly due to malformations in his lower limbs. His legs were disproportionate to his body, and his feet had fused toes, a condition known as syndactyly, common in cases of close consanguinity. Rebecca, the fourth child, arrived in 1952 with severe microcephaly. Her head was significantly smaller than normal, indicating compromised brain development. She never learned to speak or feed herself, remaining in a vegetative state throughout her brief 8 years of life. Thomas, now 23, began showing signs of mental deterioration. The psychological weight of his situation, combined with the pressure of supporting a family under such conditions, was taking its toll. He developed episodes of erratic behavior, swinging between stretches of absolute silence and explosions of anger directed at his own children. The Harrington property became a scene of progressive isolation. The children seldom left the farm, and when they did, they wore hats and clothing that hid their deformities. Martha had established a rigid system of control, forbidding any interaction with strangers and keeping the children occupied with chores to prevent them from venturing beyond the property's boundaries. In 1953, the local church pastor, Reverend William Patterson, paid an unannounced visit to the Harrington farm. What he found left him deeply troubled. Children with obvious deformities, precarious living conditions, and an atmosphere thick with tension and fear. Martha explained the children's conditions as God's will, but something in the family's behavior alarmed the clergyman. Reverend Patterson noticed the physical resemblance between Thomas and the younger children was far stronger than expected for half-siblings. The family's distinctive blue eyes appeared with unusual intensity, and certain birthmarks seemed statistically impossible in an ordinary family. During this visit, Rebecca suffered one of her frequent seizures. The Reverend offered medical help, but Martha refused outright, claiming doctors wouldn't understand the family's special condition. This refusal raised his suspicions even higher about what was truly happening on that isolated land. Local church records show Reverend Patterson attempted further visits in the following months, but always found the family absent or too busy to receive him. The regional religious community began to whisper about the Harringtons, spinning theories of family curses and divine punishment. In 1954, the fifth child, James, was born presenting the most severe set of deformities yet seen in the family. His hands had only 3 fingers each. His eyes were different colors, heterochromia, and he developed a heart condition that severely limited his activity. James rarely cried or showed emotion, remaining in a state of apathy that worried even Martha. The year 1958 brought a severe drought to Kentucky, forcing many rural families to seek government aid. The Harringtons, having remained isolated for 15 years, finally had to interact with external authorities when Martha was compelled to request food assistance from the Pineville Social Services Office. The assigned caseworker, Dorothy Mills, a 45-year-old University of Louisville graduate with years of experience, was immediately alert upon first seeing the Harrington children. Their physical deformities matched patterns she had studied in consanguinity cases during her training. Dorothy noted that Sarah, now 13, had not only facial deformities but a speech pattern characteristic of severe intellectual disability. David, 11, breathed laboriously and had frequent fainting spells. Michael, 9, needed help walking, and James, 4, remained completely apathetic throughout the interview. During the routine investigation for aid approval, Dorothy discovered inconsistencies in the family documents. The birth records for the younger children listed Thomas as the father, but there was no marriage certificate for Thomas and any woman. When asked about the children's mother, Martha gave contradictory and evasive answers. The social worker decided to conduct unannounced home visits to assess the family's living conditions. On her first visit in September 1958, she found Thomas and Martha sharing a bedroom, while the 5 children slept in a single, poorly ventilated room. The house's layout strongly suggested a marital relationship between mother and son. Dorothy confronted Martha about the situation, but received only vehement denials and threats that the family would move away if she continued harassing them. However, the social worker had seen enough to suspect a case of consanguinity and child neglect. It was during this investigation that Dorothy uncovered something even more disturbing. Speaking with James, the 4-year-old repeated a phrase he'd overheard from the adults: "Dad Thomas is Mom Martha's brother." This innocent child's revelation confirmed the social worker's worst suspicions about the true nature of the family relationships. The moment you hear an innocent child utter words that reveal the horror of his own existence, you realize some secrets are too heavy to stay buried. Leave a comment saying which part of this story has impacted you the most so far. Dorothy Mills immediately contacted the local sheriff, Robert Kane, a 52-year-old man who had served the community for over 2 decades. When she shared her discovery, the sheriff initially resisted believing the situation's severity. Cases of consanguinity were whispered about in rural communities, but rarely investigated officially. Yet the evidence Dorothy presented was too compelling to ignore. The children's deformities, combined with the household setup and James's innocent statement, painted a picture that demanded immediate investigation. In October 1958, Sheriff Robert Kane obtained a search warrant to officially investigate the Harrington property. Accompanied by social worker Dorothy Mills and county physician Dr. Henry Morrison, they arrived at the farm on a foggy morning that mirrored the dark atmosphere they would encounter. Dr. Morrison, a University of Kentucky Medical School graduate with a background in basic genetics, was crucial for documenting the children's conditions. His examination revealed a consistent pattern of congenital malformations he described as textbook examples of inbreeding depression. Sarah, now 13, had not only severe facial deformities but also a progressive scoliosis compromising her breathing. Dr. Morrison documented that her mental age was roughly that of a 6-year-old, and she had developed repetitive behaviors characteristic of autism spectrum disorders. David, age 11, was diagnosed with a congenital heart condition that severely limited his life expectancy. His lungs were underdeveloped, and he had episodes of cyanosis, a bluish skin tint indicating poor blood oxygenation. Dr. Morrison estimated David would not live past 15 without medical intervention. Michael, age 9, had such severe bone malformations that Dr. Morrison recommended multiple surgeries, procedures simply not available in rural Kentucky in 1958. His legs were different lengths, and misaligned hips caused him constant pain. James, the youngest at 4, had the most complex medical problems. Beyond the visible deformities, Dr. Morrison diagnosed him with mild hydrocephalus, fluid on the brain, which explained his severely limited mental development and persistent apathy. Under legal pressure and faced with irrefutable medical evidence, Martha finally confessed to the true nature of her relationship with Thomas. She admitted she had been forced by circumstance and family tradition to maintain a union with her own son after her husband's death in 1943. Thomas, now 31, showed clear signs of psychological deterioration. During testimony, he fluctuated between moments of lucidity, where he expressed deep remorse, and episodes of confusion where he seemed not to fully comprehend what his life had become. The investigation also revealed Martha had suffered multiple miscarriages over the years, a common consequence of close consanguinity. Dr. Morrison estimated that, considering the 5 surviving children, Martha had likely been pregnant at least 10 times, with half of those pregnancies ending in natural loss due to genetic incompatibility. The case gained regional attention when Louisville newspapers published stories about Kentucky's most isolated family. The local community split between those expressing compassion for the family's tragic situation and others who reacted with revulsion, demanding severe punishment. In December 1958, the Bell County Court decided to remove the children from their parents. Sarah, David, Michael, and James were placed in separate care institutions for children with severe disabilities. Rebecca had died 2 years earlier from complications related to her microcephaly. In January 1959, Thomas Harrington was sentenced to 15 years in prison for crimes against morals and decency, a legal term of the era encompassing incestuous relationships. Martha received a 10-year sentence but, considered a victim of circumstance, served only 4 years in a psychiatric institution. The Harrington legacy became one of the most documented cases of consanguinity in 20th-century American medical literature. Sarah was admitted to Danville State Hospital, where she remained until her death in 1967 at age 22 from respiratory complications related to her congenital deformities. David, as Dr. Morrison had predicted, died in 1962 at age 15 during experimental heart surgery at the University of Louisville. His death was documented in medical studies on the cardiovascular effects of close consanguinity, contributing to scientific understanding of inbreeding. Michael lived to age 25, remaining in specialized institutional care. Despite severe physical limitations, he developed basic communication skills and showed affection for his caregivers. He died in 1974 from kidney complications related to his congenital malformations. James, the youngest, surprised doctors by living to age 31, dying in 1985. Though his mental capacity never advanced beyond that of a 3-year-old, he found some quality of life in a specialized institution where he received appropriate care for the first time. The Harrington property was abandoned after the family's arrest. The wooden house deteriorated rapidly, and nature began reclaiming the land that had witnessed so much suffering. Today, only stone foundations remain visible, shrouded by dense vegetation that hides the physical traces of this tragedy. The Harrington case significantly influenced social assistance policies in Kentucky. Dorothy Mills, the social worker who uncovered the case, became a national advocate for children's rights and helped establish stricter protocols for identifying neglect and consanguinity in isolated rural communities. Thomas was released from prison in 1967 but never reintegrated into society. He spent his final years in a small Louisville boarding house, working manual jobs and avoiding contact. He died in 1983 at age 56 from alcohol-related liver cirrhosis, an escape he'd found to cope with his life's trauma. Martha, after her release in 1963, moved to a small Tennessee town under a new identity. She worked as a housekeeper until retirement and died in 1979, taking her secrets to the grave. She never contacted any of her surviving children after leaving the psychiatric institution. The Harrington scientific legacy contributed to important research on the effects of consanguinity in isolated human populations. Medical studies based on the children helped establish early identification protocols for inbreeding-related malformations and influenced public health policies in rural communities. This case remains a dark reminder of how isolation, distorted traditions, and extreme circumstances can lead families into the deepest degradation. The Harrington family paid the ultimate price for traditions that valued blood purity over basic human well-being. If you've watched this far, it's because you appreciate this kind of story. Leave a comment saying "I watched here" so I can get to know you and see who truly enjoys the stories on this channel. Subscribe to discover other equally disturbing cases hidden away for decades. Leave a like if this story impacted you, and share so more people learn these accounts that society preferred to forget, but which must be told to understand the limits of the human condition.